Welcome to Behind the Mic with AudioFile magazine, where the subject is audiobooks and the actors who narrate them. I'm Jo Reed, and with me is contributor to AudioFile, Stephen Cummings. Hey, Stephen, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, Jo?
I'm doing very well. So you're going to talk about 3 audiobooks. Let's start with what they are.
Yeah, so this is a theme, and the theme is New York City. Not about the city itself, but how New York City plays a role in all 3 of these books. And as we go through them, it's going to be pretty evident that they are pretty closely linked, not just in place, but also time. A lot of the events take place during the 70s and 80s.
So what are the 3 books?
3 books today are Lorne by Susan Morrison, read by Kristen DiMercurio, YOKO by David Sheff, read by Max Meyers, and I Regret Almost Everything by Keith McNally, read by Richard E. Grant.
My gosh. Well, not only are they 3 amazingly interesting books, but I am from New York City and I was there during that time. So it's like, welcome to my life.
Well, I hope that these books captured the experience somewhat accurately.
Well, I've listened to a couple of them. So why don't we start with Lorne?
Absolutely. So, as I think it's fair to say most listeners may know, Saturday Night Live is a staple of the network NBC for over 50 years. I think this is their 50th year, just had their anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
Lorne Michaels produces that show. The audiobook's approach is to alternate between a conventional history of Lorne Michaels, hence the name of the book, and highlights of one of the shows in production. In this case, it's an episode hosted by the actor Jonah Hill. So the tension builds as you listen, as we approach Saturday's dress rehearsal and eventual live broadcast.
And that's juxtaposed with Lorne Michaels and how he got to run Saturday Night Live and his life doing that all those years.
Absolutely. He's been the producer for almost the entirety of that show's run, with a few years in the early 80s when he stepped away. So it's important to note that this is a book about Lorne Michaels. So it's not about SNL. So when he leaves the show for a while, we go with him and follow his story.
And this is, I've been listening to this book, and I'll say right from the get-go, it is so well written. Susan Morrison, an editor at the New Yorker, and man, can that woman write.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought Kristen DiMercurio, for a 23-hour long book,
Mm-hmm.
she just nails that narrative voice so well, so well. I just can't stop listening.
I really loved this one, and you're absolutely right. As far as the voice performance goes, Kristen DiMercurio, so she won an award just recently with Julia Whalen for Atmosphere, which was one of my favorite audiobooks so far this year.
Yeah, Michelle and I just talked about that book last week. She loved it too.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
No, and so Kristen DiMercurio, she has to convey Michael's history, knowing that listeners will be familiar with many of the actors who contribute to this really deeply researched biography. That just means a lot of voices. And that includes Lorne Michaels himself, who has something of a well-known cadence. He's very erudite. He's a little cryptic. Michaels doesn't like to say "you're hired," for example. From this book, I learned he hints at his plans to bring you on the show, but he's left actors wondering, am I on the show? Am I not on the show? I don't know. And then they find out that they're supposed to find an apartment in New York, so they know they're hired. And that's more of his approach. So DiMercurio handles all this, just all these voices, without overdoing anything or taking listeners out of the story by virtue of overdoing a voice or two.
Well, why don't we listen to a little bit of it?
Great. And so here's an example of this audiobook's approach, particularly how DiMercurio handles Michael's signature mannerism.
Okay, this is Lorne, the man who invented Saturday Night Live by Susan Morrison, read by Kristen DiMercurio.
Lorne Michaels' week started off with a tea party and a death threat. The death threat wasn't aimed at him, but at Jimmy Fallon, the host of The Tonight Show, which Michaels executive produces. The tea party was in honor of his friend, the playwright Tom Stoppard. After that, in his office on the 17th floor of 30 Rockefeller Plaza, he would preside over the first meeting for that week's episode of Saturday Night Live. I was just at a lovely tea at the Lotos Club for Tom Stoppard, Michaels said, standing in his office, addressing a handful of his senior producers and writers who had gathered for a preliminary meeting to troubleshoot the coming week and take a moment to check in. It was very civilized, in contrast to this. He swiveled his head around to indicate present company and gave a mild smirk.
Okay, I have to confess, I did have some difficulty with her Lorne. And it does pull me back a little bit. But I still think that Earphones is so well deserved because, man, that narrative voice was remarkable and keeping us so present in that journey. I felt like I was just in the hands of a master storyteller, which Susan Morrison is. But then with Kristen, just telling me the story, I didn't feel like somebody was reading something to me.
Yeah, I love it when an audiobook is able to just feel like pure storytelling, which, given the fact that this is a very long book, this is a 23-hour audiobook,
Yeah.
she does an excellent job. And I'm with you on the Lorne
Oh,
of it all, his voice. I think that voice has become kind of a staple of our understanding of Lorne Michaels, that it may be difficult to do his voice in any way but you have to kind of hat tip to it, I think, a little bit.
yeah. I'm so glad you're talking about this book because I love it.
Me too.
Okay, so what's next?
So next we're going to talk about a book called YOKO by David Sheff. This is read by Max Meyers, and it's about Yoko Ono. Now, Yoko Ono, interestingly enough, in the book we just talked about, I think she appears there because they talk about John Lennon, and there's a thread here. So this book is an Earphones winner, and Yoko Ono's name alone is likely one of the most globally recognizable names, in my opinion, at least.
Mm-hmm.
But what she means to people, to put it mildly, is a little mixed. She is, of course, known for her deeply woven relationship with John Lennon, the legendary member of the Beatles. But for many artists, her avant-garde work, her artwork, is really her true legacy. So this book works in part to reframe her history in those terms.
Yeah, it's interesting. It got mixed reviews. The New York Times seemed to like it, but The Guardian called it polemical and a lot worse. So how did you find it?
Look, I find any public figure with this kind of complicated history fascinating, and I want to learn more about them because I want to know what's been shaping my opinion or sense of who they are. So I welcomed this audiobook because I just wanted to learn more about Yoko Ono. I have a very Western filter. What I know about Yoko Ono, I know from the Beatles, and there's a strong opinion that she broke them up. This book talks a lot about how maybe that wasn't actually true, that even some of the members of the Beatles say that's not accurate. We were already on our way to breaking up. So I really appreciate that. And she's really got this long history of just doing the work that she does in art. I wanted to learn more about that. This book takes a long time kind of going through some of her history and where she gets the sensibility that she does.
Question, do they talk about her fascination with fortune tellers, tarot readers?
They sure do. It comes up. There are moments in this book, in this audiobook, where I learned that she may have been taken advantage of because of that fascination with people who work in that world. When she was living in New York later in life, I think there was a system of those folks who were working with her to read tarot cards or something, and they were all at the same time networking with each other so that they got all their stories straight when they talked to her.
I knew one of those tarot readers.
Oh my gosh, you did?
No, seriously, yeah. And it was not later in her life, so sort of midlife. And he was on call. I mean, if he was having dinner at my house, he had to leave my number with her.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
And it's not that she called every time, but she'd call.
Wow.
Yeah, it was bizarre. I have to say, I find it's read by Max Meyers. I'm curious, and I know that Max identifies as they, them, but that voice is male. And I think it's a curious choice for this book.
I'm going to agree with you. I think this is an evergreen challenge for narrators. So if you are a male voice narrating a female voice, particularly somebody as well known as Yoko Ono, it's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, well, we were talking about earlier how it was, I thought in any case, it was a challenge for Kristen when she did the Lorne Michaels voice.
Hmm.
It's hard for women doing men too. It's not that it can't be done, but sometimes it can be a little difficult when we already know the voice, as in the case of Lorne Michaels and Yoko Ono.
Yes.
So why don't we hear a little?
Yes. So in this clip, you're going to hear exactly what we're talking about. Just talking a little bit about how Max Meyers approaches this material, and particularly the voice of Yoko Ono.
Okay, this is Yoko by David Sheff, and it's read by Max Meyers.
Yoko was not understating the pressures imposed on her by the prominent family into which she was born. The Yasudas, her mother's side, were among the 4 most influential and wealthiest families in Japan from the late 1800s through World War II. The Yasuda Zaibatsu, a family-owned conglomerate, included Yasuda Bank, once the largest in Japan. It became Fuji Bank. Yoko's father was a bank executive. My mother used to say to me, "Your father was only president of a bank, but my father owned one."
I'm going to be honest, this really doesn't do it for me because I think Max sounds kind of performative and like making this text important.
Yeah, I think that there's this sense that there's a reach for gravitas. And
Yes.
I will say that, look, again, very, very famous person here and
Yes,
very
hard.
complicated history. So there is a hill to climb here in order to convey this work. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm a little mixed myself. This audiobook did win an Earphones Award. So for some listeners, this is going to resonate, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's like the 2 reviews that I read, one from The Guardian, which, did not love this book, and one from the New York Times, which really had a lot of fulsome praise for it. And in the same way I think we read books differently, we also hear them differently. And a narrator that absolutely I can be so engaged by doesn't necessarily mean that you will be as well.
Right. I completely agree.
Yeah, it's that's, the joy of reading and listening. I mean, we kind of complete that loop ourselves.
We do. Absolutely.
Okay, so what's the last book we're going to talk about?
The last book, of course, keeping in our theme here, is a book called I Regret Almost Everything. It's a memoir, and it's written by Keith McNally, and it's read by Richard E. Grant.
I just love Richard E. Grant. He has quite a number of audiobooks under his belt. Some he's written himself.
And I'm glad he does. When I saw this book get published, it wasn't necessarily on my immediate list, but once I saw that he narrated it, it became a must. So I wound up making time for it. This book did win an AudioFile Earphones Award. I think that is right on.
Oh, completely. Yeah, because I've been listening to this too. So remind us who Keith McNally is.
So he is a restaurateur. That's how I knew him, and that's how I know him. In New York City, multiple locations, primarily in New York City. He's had a few here and there. He opens his audiobook making it clear that he's not attempting to capture the most positive version of himself. He captures a fascinating, complicated life that includes an early life of stage and movie acting. He's traveled extensively. He's had numerous relationships with men, with women, eventual personal and professional failures, some broken relationships, and a childhood punctuated by abuse. And also, he talks a bit about something very difficult, which is his own attempt to die by suicide.
Yeah. And he also suffered a stroke.
He did. And so I wonder, as he recovers, that one of the choices here was, let's go with somebody to narrate this book, because I don't know how. I just note that I suspect that his ability to narrate his memoir is limited by that stroke. Regardless, and I don't know. Regardless, Richard E. Grant is exceptional.
Oh, he's a great narrator. Definitely. I love his voice.
I do too. And he's able to make every moment in this audiobook, every story that is told, every reminiscence, every difficult truth just feel really significant. And he captures a real natural, understated tone throughout. He can be really devastating in that way that only perhaps a certain kind of English sensibility can accomplish. And I really just found myself taking all this in one of those, maybe I can finish this audiobook in 1 or 2 listens just because I'm enjoying it so much.
Well, and for me, again, this was, McNally's restaurants. He managed One Fifth, which was one of my favorite restaurants, and before it closed. And he's opened many restaurants in New York, including
Mhm.
the Minetta Tavern, which I love, and Cafe Luxembourg, which is truly one of my go-tos.
It's so interesting how much impact he's had, and that's another reason I really wanted to make sure we touched on it today in this theme. He came to New York to work in film, but he admits early he didn't have the courage to do that, so he started working in restaurants as a busboy. That's how he got started. And he got to know a lot of the luminaries of New York at that time as he was working with all of these different patrons. He befriended Lorne Michaels, who in the early days of SNL would the cast and crew would go to have dinner at one of his places of work after their shows, which is another reason why all of this that we're talking about today threads together so well.
Yeah. Well, why don't we hear a little bit? Let's hear the fabulous Richard Grant.
Absolutely. So McNally describes in this passage we're going to listen to his experience waking up after being rushed to the hospital after suffering a stroke.
Okay. This is I Regret Almost Everything, which is also a fabulous title. It's by Keith McNally, and it's read by Richard E. Grant.
I woke up several hours later in Charing Cross Hospital. The first thing the doctor told me was that I'd had a stroke. The second thing was that my brain would never be the same again. Perhaps his bluntness was necessary for legal reasons, but from where I stood or lay, it was a brutal awakening. After the doctor left, I tried wriggling my arms and legs to check that I wasn't paralyzed. I wasn't, thank God. To test my memory, I read the alphabet on the back of the nurse's chart. I then tried saying the letters aloud. But here there was a problem. The words wouldn't conform to my efforts. They exited my mouth in such a slurred and disorderly way that I sounded like a stage drunk.
I really appreciate Grant's understated performance here because, he trusts the text.
He sure does. I love his performance for the way that he makes you lean into him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even in that bit, I found myself leaning in.
He doesn't overstate. He's not very didactic in any way. He imbues trust in the listener.
He really does. Wonderful. And an earphones winner, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course. It's Richard Grant. Okay, so that's I Regret Almost Everything, a memoir by Keith McNally, read by Richard E. Grant. So our three books are YOKO by David Sheff and Max Meyers, LORNE by Susan Morrison, read by Kristen DiMercurio, and as we just said, I Regret Almost Everything, a memoir by Keith McNally, read by Richard E. Grant. It's a great week to celebrate New York. I'm actually leaving for New York tomorrow.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Congratulations.
It's perfect timing. Stephen, it is such a pleasure to talk to you, and I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joe.
Support for Behind the Mic comes from Hachette Audio, publisher of the audiobook Kiss Her Goodbye, the sequel to Lisa Gardner's Still See You Everywhere. It's narrated by Hillary Huber. Behind the Mic is produced by Jessica Lockhart. Robin Whitten, Michelle Cobb, Stephen Cummings, Leslie Fine, Alan Minskoff, Alex Ritchie, Laura Rossi, and Kendra Winchester are our contributors. Jennifer Dahl and Coco McCracken are our editors. And the music is William Ross Chernoff's Nomads 4-Way. I'm your host, Joe Reed. I'll talk to you next week. Good listening.